There's an intense debate about how best to fight climate change. Why should carbon capture be one of the solutions that should be widely adopted?
There's a critical need to remove all of the CO2 that's already in the atmosphere. There's a lot of focus on reducing emissions, but we've already put a substantial amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. So carbon capture from existing CO2 in the air is, in our view, an absolutely critical technology we need to develop.
Your company, Carbon Energy, their solution, how specifically does it work in doing this?
We pull the CO2 out of the atmosphere. We do so by starting the process with a large fan. That large fan sucks all of the air in, and then we have a chemical reaction that captures the CO2 as the air comes through. The CO2 and the chemical compound drop to the bottom, and then over a series of other steps, we make that CO2 concentrated CO2 gas. And at each step in the process, we reform the chemical used in the previous step. So what that means is it's a completely closed loop system, air in, CO2 out.
What are the benefits in using this method?
The main benefit is negative emissions. So actually going backwards on the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. That's the fundamental benefit. And there's very few ways in which we can actually negatively reduce our emissions. There are ways we can stop emissions, but just stopping them isn't enough.
What are some of the real-world applications for the technology? I believe you're looking at synthetic fuel.
Yeah, so we've decided to take our CO2 we capture and combine it with hydrogen and turn that into a synthetic fuel. This is a fuel that is fully compatible with every vehicle, every car, every truck, every plane. And when you put it in that vehicle, the vehicle becomes carbon neutral because you're using the CO2 that was emitted years ago, and it's been created into a fuel again. You put it into your engine, you drive it, it burns the CO2 back into the atmosphere, we capture it, and we make more fuel. It's effectively a way of recycling CO2 when making fuel.
What kind of positive impact would something like this have on the global transport industry?
First of all, transportation is about 20% of complete emissions. Right now, we don't have a solution for decarbonizing airline travel, for example. So here, by changing the fuel, you make all vehicles carbon neutral, but without the huge change in infrastructure that, for example, electrification, hydrogen cars, fuel cells, all of those solutions require a huge change in infrastructure. We all have to get a new car. So with this solution, instead of changing everything else, you just change the fuel.
Speaking of solutions, what's the biggest hurdle in your solution becoming widely adopted commercially?
I think it's scaling. It's difficult for a new company and a new fuel to be introduced into the market. So to address that, our business model is to partner with companies. So we're working to partner with companies worldwide where we would provide our technology to them. They build one of our plants, they start producing fuel. And that way, we're working with we hope to work with some of the largest companies in the world to make large quantities of fuel. So decarbonizing through changing the fuel becomes feasible.
I imagine the cost to do this method is extremely expensive. How do you endeavor to bring this down?
So actually, no. The cost for us for a gallon or a liter of fuel today is about 20% more than wholesale diesel. We are not expecting the general public to pay that extra 25%. What we do at the moment is the various carbon credit and policy regimes that are in place to incentivize low carbon solutions, they more than cover that offset. So our fuel will be available to you, the user, at the same price as regular fuel.